then we'll make a start. Please do come through. Do feel free to take your seats. Very warm welcome to the London Buddhist Centre. My name is Majid, I'm part of the Thursday evening class team here. So particularly warm welcome if you've not been to the centre before. Say just a few words about the format of the evening. So the evening will be in two halves. The first half we're going to meditate. So if you know that practice, you can follow me through three or four into the shrine reading that practice. If you don't know the mindfulness breathing, or you'd like a refresher in the practice, or you haven't sort of practiced in our tradition, then you can follow Dharma Bharti here, and so he'll lead the practice in the other shrine room, which is in that direction. So if you'd like a refresher, or you're used to mindfulness breathing or used meditation, follow Dharma Bharti. And we will have a tea break at 8 o'clock. And the second half of the evening really is the main event. I mean, meditation is very, very important. But we've got a very special guest here this evening, Vimalasara, all the way from Canada. And Vimalasara, in the second half of the evening, we will be launching their new book. So it's a book, really wonderful book called First Aid Kit for the Mind. So it's breaking down the cycle of habitual behaviours. So it's a book I've been reading over the last week or so, and there's just so much wisdom in the book, there's so much humanity in the book. It's just really, really beautiful. So Vimalasara and I will be in conversation in the second half of the evening. I'll be asking Vimalasara about the book and about their life, and it's going to be, I think, a very, very special evening. Vimalasara also has very kindly agreed to sign books, and we're going to do that during the tea break. So do buy the book. We've got the book on sale at the main desk, and Vimalasara is happy to sign the book during the tea break. But that's all for the second half. First half, mindfulness breathing. If you know the practice, follow me through that door. If you don't know the practice, you'll like a refresher, then follow on the practice. Thank you. Yes, welcome to the main shrine room. Please do get the mats and cushions that you need. May well have to move the chairs back for the second half when the others join us, but so it's nice to have a full shrine room. So great. Okay.
Okay, so I'm going to say welcome again. I want to say welcome to those who are tuning in online. So our Thursday evening class is not usually broadcast on YouTube, but this evening, very special evening. So yeah, we are online as well. So very warm welcome to all of you online. I've just given sort of an introduction to those in the room. I'm going to repeat that introduction for those online. So what we're going to do this evening, we're going to meditate in the first half. So I'm going to ring bells for mindfulness and breathing practice. We'll sort of meditate until about 8 o'clock. Then we'll have a tea break. And obviously feel free to have your tea at home or whatever you want to do. And yeah, the second half of the evening, very, very special evening for us at the Buddhist Centre this evening. We are launching Vimalasara's new book, First Aid Kit for the Mind. A really beautiful book with many sort of pith Buddhist teachings in it. So we'll be doing that from probably around 8:30, so after the tea break. And we'll finish the evening around 9:15. I hope you've all voted. I know there's one person who needs to leave early to vote, but I've just mentioned that. That's the only politics of the evening. There you go. Just draw a line there. So, okay. But yeah, we'll start the evening by saluting the shrine together. So feel free to join in if you wish. Namo Buddhaya. Namo Buddhaya. Namo Dharmaya. Namo Dharmaya. Namo Sanghaya. Namo Sanghaya. Namo Namah. Namo Namah. Great, so yes, please do set yourself up for some meditation. As we know, posture is very important for our meditation, so we can just take as much time as we need to set ourselves up. What I'll do is I'll just lead us through some body awareness, just very briefly, just to help us settle. And then I'll read a few words from Vimalasara's book, and then I'll ring the bells for mindfulness of breathing practice. So when you're ready, closing your eyes. Yes, good moment to turn off devices as well, if you haven't done so already. You might want to take a few deeper breaths. So just extend the out breath as though you're blowing through a straw. Empty the lungs. Just allow the in-breath to flow in naturally. So this sense of putting down whatever we've been carrying through the day. So there's nothing else to do now, nowhere else to be. So just coming back to the body. Coming back to the earth beneath you. Seeing what you can feel of the contact with the ground, with the cushion or chair beneath you. Just letting go even more fully into that support. So a sense of relaxing, but also connecting with alertness, uprightness. So the spine is rising up in its natural curves. Shoulders falling away from the ears. And the chest is open. And bringing a kindly awareness to any areas of tension in the body. Perhaps in the belly or around the jaw. Kindly awareness of those areas will help release the tension in its own time. Now tuning into the breath in the body. This natural process of being breathed. So just allowing the breath to come and go on its own. The practice is one of gently but persistently coming back to the sensations of the breath in the body. Noticing when our mind wanders off. So noticing with a kindly awareness. Coming back to the direct experience of the breath in the body. Body like a mountain. Just as a mountain is strong, firm, present, allow your body to be strong, firm, and present too. Heart like an ocean. Just as the waves in an ocean arise and cease, allow your feelings and emotions to arise and cease. Mind like the sky. Just as the sky is wide and open, allow your mind to be wide and open. Breath like an anchor. Just as an anchor steadies a boat, Allow your breath to steady your body whenever an emotion arises. Mindfulness of breathing practice. So now just dropping any effort you've been making in the meditation practice. So just continuing to sit still just for a few more moments. So we just sit and do nothing for a short period of time. Then when you're ready, opening your eyes, coming out of the meditation. Okay, great. So we'll have a tea break now, and for those online, we'll probably be back ready for the book launch at around 20 past 8, 15, 20 minutes time. So we look forward to seeing you then. Thank you.
So that's fine. glass of water on it.
Oh, that'd be great. Yeah, thank you.
Do you fancy a couple of blankets?
I'm okay actually. Yeah. Yeah. Thank you. Yeah. Great.
Get anything else for you?
Brilliant. Yeah. Thanks a lot. Thank you.
is to see through the delusion of a fixed self. itself, in terms of the delusion that also we're somehow fixed. During this lifetime, our thoughts and moods and bodies are fixed and are unchanging. Well, this is all a delusion. And really, really central is this delusion that we're separate from other people. Somehow, intrinsically separate. And the Buddha said the truth is that we're really intimately and intrinsically associated and linked with other people. And just going on for a retreat, especially the summer retreat, nice long retreat, it's just a fantastic place to see this delusion in action, to see the opposite, see how we are intimately linked with each other. And we can come together on a retreat, it can be a 2-day retreat, it can be a 5-day retreat, a longer retreat, and we can see the connection between us, we can see the similarities, we all want to be loved and express love, we all suffer, we all have pain, we all have aspirations, we all have volitions. It's just a great place to go and discover this. What we can also do there, and it sounds like a paradox, but we can also see how we have an opportunity to become true individuals also. So that's not a paradox, it's too complicated to go into it, but so we can come together intimately, and we can also express our individuality, and we have great conditions to explore those things on retreat. So I really urge you to have a look at the summer retreat, if you can go on those dates, the 2nd of August to the 11th of August. If you can't make that retreat, go online and look at all the retreats listed throughout the year. We have retreats for everything. We have yoga and Buddhism retreats, we have 12-step Buddhism retreats, we have people of colour retreats. If you're a person of colour, I really urge you to have a look at our retreats there. If you're not a person of colour, but have a person of colour in your life, tell them about our people of colour retreats. If you're not a person of colour and don't have a person of colour in your life, get one. Okay, so now we'll plot our drinks down, we'll go through and we'll meet Magistea and sorry, Vimalasara. Thank you.
Great. So yes, if you're in the small shrine room, please just do grab a chair or mats and cushions, make yourself comfortable. So yeah, welcome to those online as well. Welcome back. Right. So I'll just wait for us to settle. So yes, and particular welcome to Vimalasara. So I'm going to just introduce Vimalasara shortly. Just to say I'm Manjusea, part of the Thursday evening class, particularly for those online. We have this format of conversation, meditation and conversation on Thursday evenings. And from time to time we have very special guests who come along. I'm so glad you can join us, Vimalasara, so all the way from Canada. So let me just say a few words of introduction. I'll read these. And this is from Vimalasara's new book. So that's what we're launching this evening. First Aid Kit for the Mind. So that's what we're going to be discussing. But yeah, just a few words of introduction from the book. So yeah, Vimalasara is someone who, when you read what you've done in your life, it sounds to me like it's the life of several people. It's really incredible. So international correspondence, covering Aboriginal deaths in custody. So you also interviewed ex-rebels from Sierra Leone, Sinn Féin prisoners as well. And at a certain point, your work sort of in conflict transitioned to working with gangs, working with those who are incarcerated, and you're trained in mindfulness. You're a member of our order, and you are Vimalasara is the award-winning author of 10 books. So this is the latest of 10 books.
11th.
This is the 11th. Okay, great. There we go. Right. And yeah, you speak internationally, and you also have your private practice in Canada. And in a way, that's the briefest I can give of your biography in a way. So let's give Vimalasara a very warm welcome. Yeah, so delighted you're here, Vimalasara. So we'll mainly be talking about the new book. So I'll ask a few questions, and then open up to others in the room who would like to ask questions as well. Maybe we can even open up to people online who want to ask questions. Suhaib is kindly looking after the tech, so he might be able to give us some any questions from those online. So and we'll finish about 9:15. But yeah, maybe I'll just start by asking you about your life as a writer. So this is your 11th book. I think I'd heard about you before I came along to the Buddhist Centre as well as a writer. I remember going to sort of black writing workshops, and I'm pretty sure I was aware of you as a writer. So this is a Dharma book, a Buddhist book. You've written poetry, drama, non-fiction, fiction. So I don't know if you could just say, where did writing sort of start for you? When did you start writing?
On the school desk, writing roses are red, violets are blue. Okay. I'm not bad, it must be you. Whoever used to scrawl on the desk. And I think, actually, seriously, I would say when I realised that I really enjoyed writing because it was such a cathartic process, was actually cramming for exams and then writing. So you do that cramming for exams and then having to write the answers, and I really it was just such a wonderful process. And I think people as a kid always said to me, you should always write, and it was like they wanted me to write then about my life, and I was like, no, I'm not really interested in that. And then I went to Leeds University, and I dropped out in the second year and trained with Business Press International as a journalist. And that's where it really began.
Wow.
Yeah.
So you went. Where were you? Where were you before Leeds? Then where were you at school?
Where was I at school? I went to Ilford County High for Girls. That would be the last school. So a grammar school in Essex. So I grew up in Essex, and then I was kind of educated in other such salubrious places.
And then so coming out of Leeds, and so was that journalism work that you were doing then? That first job? Or?
Yeah, I started writing for a free news sheet called The Leveller. Gosh, you really did. Yeah, The Leveller, which was based in Brixton, which was a very political newspaper, and it was the day, wasn't it, with the golf balls, and you stuck the text on the page, and those moments when a line would be missing and you'd be looking over on the floor to try and find this missing line to stick on the page. So yeah, I think I was one of the first people out of my friends to kind of actually have a computer. I can remember those old typewriters that I had, and you make a mistake and then you had to write it all over again. Yeah, painful.
Those are the days.
Those were the days, yeah.
Yes.
And then I started writing for the Morning Star, and writing. Well, I was a feature writer for The Voice when The Voice was a decent newspaper, and then I went overseas. In fact, actually, I really wanted to go out and cover the news in South Africa. And the British government put embargo saying that no journalists could actually go out there. And so I covered when Bozak came over here. So I went out to Australia and covered land rights and Aboriginal deaths in custody, and then came back. Yeah. And that was it was interesting actually, because for me, when I was out in Australia, I really had to think, was I a journalist or was I a political activist? Yeah, and that was really quite painful, actually. What was I? And definitely, I stopped being a journalist when I came back, because I realised you couldn't tell the truth. As a journalist, you couldn't tell the truth. There were only certain things that you could say, and I really wanted to be able to start telling more of the truth. And so that I started working in the gay media, in the gay press. In fact, North London Buddhist Centre is where the pink paper used to be.
Okay, wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. And I went into writing plays. Yeah, I was a performance poet for a while, and kind of messing around as we did back in those days, when you could be on the dole and do what you wanted to do. Yeah. Although I did for a while worked for Lambeth, and Lambeth Town Hall. I was in the press office, and then I got suspended for saying, I won't use the profanity, but something, the poll tax. One of the out of the window on the bus supporting people, and one of the other press officers kind of snitched on me, so I got suspended on full pay, which was quite nice.
We can probably guess the word as well.
Yes.
But, so the performance poetry and the drama, was that a way of being able to tell the truth more fully then for you in terms of the activism, or what was that transition like to those other forms?
Yeah, that's a interesting question. I think actually, I suppose my first two books, and that's when I stopped working as a journalist, I was invited to write the first book on African and Asian lesbians in Britain. And that was a pretty tall order, because back in the day, there's a couple of people here who would know that it was very political, and actually to write it, was I going to get it right? And I invited Anne Kambata, who's no longer with us, to co-write with me. She was Asian, South Asian, and I thought that if I was going to write something about the community, I couldn't just write it as somebody being of African descent, that it had to be also somebody of Asian descent as well. So we wrote that book, Talking Black, which was a series of books, which was commissioned by, I think, Belinda Budge and somebody else. It was a whole series of books that we as queer people, well, we weren't called queer then, but I use the word now, to write. And then I was asked again by Cassell to do, and actually that was interesting. Let's stick with with, actually it was called Making Black Waves, the first one. And then I was asked by Cassell, that's it, to write another one, and I thought, well, that needs to be edited. So I edited an anthology of African and Asian lesbians called Talking Black, Black Asian Lesbians Speak Out. And my publisher rang me up and said, sit down. So I sat down and she said, you've had the worst ever review in Time Out. And so it was completely attacked, because in Making Black Waves we had said that all white people were racist. You could say that now and nobody would really bat an eyelid, but back then. And so actually that was, they slammed me for that in this next book. And then the Lesbian Avengers, I had nothing to do with it, but the Lesbian Avengers actually picketed Time Out. It was quite amazing, actually. And they had the most complaints ever. Time Out never ever gave me a game. Time Out never ever gave me good reviews after that. So that was really quite interesting when that happened. And then after that, I think I wrote my first collection of poetry and short stories. And that was part of performance world. I always say, often many Black and Asian people in the UK, in America, Canada, we start off doing performance poetry because that was where we could actually publish, because it was very difficult for us to have our work published. And actually, I would say I was really inspired by the spoken word by going to shebeens. Actually, I was somebody who really grew up in the nightclubs, and shebeens are illegal clubs which were predominantly run by black people. And what was amazing is people who would toast, and they would toast over records, you know, that community and toasting, and would be telling you what was happening, you know, in the streets, were telling you the politics about the policing, and it was just, and I just always wanted to be like that. It was just so amazing. So I think that really inspired me, and how I actually really started writing poetry is a really good friend of mine, Lorna. There was an exhibition happening for black women in Brixton, and it was kind of the first one that was at the Brixton Art Gallery, and we all lived on the street, Nursery Road, and many artists. And Lorna said to me one night, "You write?" So you write some poetry. And I was like, "Oh, really?" You know? And I wrote 2 poems, Tangled Root and The Colour of My Skin, and those poems are permanent installations up in Leeds somewhere. So those poems were really recognised. And I think actually poetry is most probably my first joy, but really having the time to do that. So I'm not sure whether that answered your question.
Wow, it's fascinating. I just feel I have so many other questions as well. I feel like we need a series of evenings with you, actually. But I was just interested also, one of the sort of things you said there was quite interesting. One of the many interesting things was just to do with the sort of intersection of the Pink Press and the North London Buddhist Centre. So presumably the Buddhist Centre wasn't there at that time, but that was the site of some of your work. I mean, maybe I'm sort of going ahead of myself a bit, but so when did the sort of when would you say your Buddhist life started amongst all of that important work?
Yeah, I had the privilege to actually live indigenously in Australia among the Yolngu people. So there's the 2 tips right up in the tip in Yirrkala. And that was such an amazing time. And there were 2 things I always remember when I first arrived. It was only the elders who spoke English, the ones who actually got the land back. And one of the elders said to me, first of all, "Oh, you're pale black." So I'd never been called pale before. I was light skinned, man, light skinned. And the other question was, where was I indigenous to? And I'd never ever thought of that, because we don't tend to think of indigeneity here in England. Now, living out in North America, very much you think about being indigenous. So it was a question that I couldn't answer. But it was a very transformative time, and I really entered the dream time. And I just knew that I couldn't appropriate that culture. And I knew that I had to come back to do the work. And when I came back to England, I was 26, 27, and I went through, I suppose it was a dark night of the soul, actually. And I always knew I wanted to meditate. That was something I always knew. And I had friends, again, to say, like, I was surrounded by people who meditated. People like Amrita. Amrita was like one of my fourth sights. I always used to say to a girlfriend, meditate, what does she do, because it was just something that she had. And then Jai Shuri, who's recently been ordained, who took 1,000 years to get ordained, she was, it would be like, we would be around the house, and that was when people like Ruth was alive, and it was like, I'm going to the Buddhist centre, and we said, yeah, we'll see you, we're just going to carry on partying, you can go. And somebody said, you want to meditate. And so my first form of meditation was transcendental meditation. And that really had a huge impact on me. And then the teacher left. I think actually it was one of those people who, had been with FWBO as it was then, and was actually kind of quite upset with FWBO and was kind of setting up his own thing. And then he went off to India. And I knew that I had found something, because actually I was thinking of moving to Spain, actually. And it stopped me because then there was no FWBO in Spain. And what it was is that I had found something that altered states. I have to admit, I like being blissed out, and meditation, it was like, wow. It didn't cost anything. It wasn't illegal, and I could get high. I remember during the millennium, and there's a couple of my mates here were like, the parties everybody was going to be going to, during the millennium. I said, forget it. I'm going on retreat for 3 weeks. So definitely, something changed. But really, I think for me, it was the first time that I really kind of experienced some kind of happiness and pleasure. And I remember when it got really serious, when I came to, I think it was a Thursday class, and the mats were all lined up orderly and straight like that, and I thought, oh my God, this is really quite serious. And then there was a point listening to Dharma talks, and I thought to myself, I must be kidding myself if it isn't having an impact. Yeah. And actually, and again, if you talk about that intersectionality, that actually definitely practicing had an impact on my writing and my work in terms of what I wrote. Yeah, definitely.
So what would you say the impact was of finding the Dharma and on your writing?
On my work, I suppose started coming along when I was 27, 28. I'm 61 now. And I was part of the time I was working for London Mardi Gras, artistic director of London Mardi Gras, so producing a huge party and, kind of champagne tans and blah, blah, blah. I introduced those and all that kind of thing, and very much in that hedonistic lifestyle. Ran one of the largest women's nightclubs at the Fridge, Queenie's. Kind of produced the lesbian beauty contest, and that was really interesting because that was like, I really had a moment of thinking, actually to do this, for the women to perform in this, they had to drink and had to be high to do this, and realising that I was creating these conditions that actually people needed to drink and actually get high to do that, and that was quite painful actually. Yeah, so definitely. And I can remember people saying, oh yeah, I have a really right livelihood, it's really meaningful. And actually on a particular level it was meaningful, but there was something where something shifted in me, and I started working in the field of conflict resolution, conflict transformation, and started working for LEAP, Confronting Conflict, here, which was and still is one of the leading organisations to work with the police in gangs, with improves, in the education system, and for Clean Break as well, which was the women's organisation working with women prisoners. So yeah, and I was still performing. I'd say one of my highlights, I think, for performing was Brown Girl in the Ring. I had 1 hour to prove to my audience that I was the Queen of England. Yeah. And it was interesting because people, several years after would stop me on the street and say, "Are you really related to?" And what I did was actually mixing fact with fiction, playing with Sophie Charlotte, who we know was the great-great-grandmother of Queen Victoria, and who was of African and German descent, and just really playing with that and just looking at the impact of growing up transracially. In fact, what happened was it was Lois Weaver and a couple of people know who I'm talking about from Spirit Breaches had this workshop, and we had to bring a picture in of our family, and I just didn't want to, because I grew up in Barbados, it was like, oh man, I don't want to do that. But I had this 1,000 or 2,000 puzzle with these kind of French people with pompadour wigs on, and I thought, oh, I'll bring this in, this is my family. Do you know what I mean? And then rather than go through, this is my family through adopting, go through being a throwback. So that was definitely one of my highlights. Also Syndyches, which has been a cult play, which again was really looking at, I suppose it was a piece of anthropology, some people have called that, was really looking at what was happening on the scene for lesbian women, as we were called then, and really looking at relationships between black and white women, and actually looking at the sexual politics between black and white women and what that meant. And then I think my other joy was actually writing a pantomime called The Adventures of Snow Black and Rose Red. Yeah, and that was wonderful to be in the audience for that. That was at the Stratford Circus one Christmas year, and it was great. So it was written for an African descent child and an Asian descent child, juxtaposing a Nancy from the African culture and Carly from the South Asian culture, and a Nancy needed to drink the blood of two young maidens for longevity, and Carly was there to save them. So that was a real joy, just kind of really playing. And then I'd say, really tracking, I think my first Dharmic book would have been 8-Step Recovery, using the Buddhist teachings to overcome addiction. And I was living in Canada then. And actually that's not so true. I suppose Detox Your Heart came first, and actually that was a Dharmic book. And so Detox Your Heart came first. And actually I wrote Detox Your Heart out of sitting 5 Goenka retreats, 10-day silent retreats, boot camp retreats, and actually I didn't actually write it on there, but actually it was really seeing very clearly that definitely that book came out of that experience of doing those silent retreats. They are really they're quite amazing. I think they are the maestros of silent retreats, or some people the boot camp of silent retreats. Yeah. And then I was actually teaching the 4 reminders, and it was the one on the precious birth, and I asked the people that week to just think about this your precious birth. And so, of course, I had that reflection as well, and I was really thinking about this, my precious birth. Why is my birth precious? And actually, every time I kept on trying to find an answer, it was quite ego-based. It was like precious because I had something to do. It was just, I just really couldn't get there, and I just left it. That thing really of reflection is, rather than work it, just let it sit and simmer. And then one day I'm walking along the street, and then I heard this voice say, what you have to offer is your recovery. And I thought, oh no, that's boring. That's not sexy. I'm not really interested in that. And because I trained in mime and physical theatre, actually that's one thing.
Oh,
so I trained in mime and physical theatre. My teacher, he always used to say that if you have an idea, well, there was two things. If you have an idea and nobody else has got the idea, most probably isn't a great idea. If you have an idea and others have got the idea, it most probably is a good idea. And the other thing is that actually if something comes up and you think, no, I'm not interested, I don't want to go there, that's the place you need to turn to.
That's interesting. Yeah, so that, so interesting to hear about the going for retreats as the sort of foundation for Detox Your Heart. I mean, it's a very sort of strong place for that book, first Dharma book for me to emerge from. And then, sometimes it sounds like a sort of an intervention or an inspiration coming to you for 8-step recovery, and one that you didn't really want, but you couldn't really ignore by the sounds of it. Yeah. So I mean, I don't know if you want to say a little bit about that book. So the book about recovery. I think it's I haven't checked this, but I think it's one of Windhorse Publications bestsellers.
Yeah.
So we have a group here that meets once or twice a week going through this 8-step recovery program. So it's an important book, an influential book. So
I suppose there's a couple of things that I'd like to say. Is first of all that it was co-wrote with Paramabandhu, and it was a beautiful piece of collaboration.
Yeah.
Beautiful. It was very beautiful. And we had this agreement that we had to both be happy with whatever went in the book. And there was only one time when it was like I said stinking thinking is an addiction. And like Paramabandhu said, I can't say that. People are, worked for National Health Service, said people aren't going to take me seriously. So I can't say that. And I looked, and we were on Skype then, the days of Skype, and I said, Paramabandhu, I said, stinking thinking is a cause of road rage. It's a cause of people taking their life. It's a cause of life and death. And he backed down, and and nobody laughed at him. Yeah. And I'd say actually again, at the same time this book was coming out, Noah Levine's book was coming out as well. Noah, who is the son of the late Stephen Levine, who had Refuge Recovery. So in a way, there was it was the time, and I think it, in a way, what's great about what is important about that book and Noah's book is that actually there was a shift in the recovery world, because once upon a time it was just 12 steps. Before 12 steps it was just the mental asylum, and then it was like there was only 12 steps. And actually what I would say about this book, and this was even from the Buddhist community, I got hate mail, because how could you be bringing out a book and threatening the stability of 12 steps? There was such hostility, real hostility. Things have changed now because Buddhist recovery has become really quite popular just among there's smart recovery. There were so many different forms of recovery. So that was just really holding my ground, and which is why it's great that actually you have 8-step here, but why it's taken quite long, because I think our hope for Paramabandhu and I was that actually the Buddhist centres would use it as part of the recovery program, but because there was some really stalwart, kind of 12-step people, there was just like no way could 8-step come in, because it really threatened. threaten people's sobriety. Yeah. And, I can get it from that perspective, from some people who was in that hell realm of addiction and 12 steps saved their life. So yeah. So those are the couple of things that I would say about that book. And I think one more that actually I've had, even senior order members, lots of people have read this book that have nothing to do with Buddhism or Triratna, but even senior order members have written to me thanking me for the book and actually realising it's an insight book. That actually is really seeing things more as they really are. Yeah.
Well, I would like to thank you for the new book, which also I think is an insight book. And, it's, First Aid Kit for the Mind, Breaking the Cycle of Habitual Behaviours. And, it's a small book, and it's sort of a handbook, but there is, I think, so many beautiful pearls of wisdom within it. I really enjoyed reading it from cover to cover. I think you say in the book, you can sort of dip into it as well. And I think it looks so beautiful as well. It's just such a beautiful thing. And it draws a little bit on the 8-step recovery model. One thing I thought about it'd be good to hear a bit about how the book came about as well. I've partly felt like it was providing a sort of trauma toolkit as well. First Aid Kit, certainly it does that in terms of, helping us on the surface of things, but it's much, much deeper than that as well. And one of the things I found so beautiful about the book was, the personal reflections you bring into it as well. I felt like I got to know you better as part of that as well. But yeah, it's a deep book. So I don't know if you could just say a bit about how this one came about.
Sure. I think first thing I'll talk about the title. Publishers kind of say, have you got a title? And it's a bit like you've got a title for a retreat, and I don't know what headspace I was in, but I said, First Aid Kit for the Mind. And then when I started working on it, for most writers, I'm that kind of writer. I have a title that gets me writing, and then the title changes. And so, it's like I go through like 4 or 5 titles. And I was actually Googling something, and then I saw that Windhorse had already started promoting his title. And I was like, the title's got to change, already. So, but actually it was really great because it kept me on task. And so trauma informed, I work in the world of trauma. I work with Gabor Mate. So I actually helped one of the founding facilitators to help him and Satdaram put his work together, Compassionate Inquiry. And I think that really had a shift in the sense that we have inquiry and mindfulness, but really it was just really looking through changing one's life through the lens of trauma rather than through the lens of Buddhism. And I wanted something that was accessible. And so in a way it was like, let's have a pocketbook. And because I know for myself, I actually finished a book 2 weeks ago, yay. I'm always like, yay, I finished a book. I have all these books that I want to read and it takes time. So it's like thinking, I didn't want to write another book where it's like people get it and they just never look in it because it's just so much. And it's one of these books where, like a pack of cards, you can open it up. And then again, like with the meditations, there's like a 1 minute practice. So if you just want a 1 minute practice or 5 minutes or 20 minutes, and if you want something a bit deeper, then there is something deeper for you. And actually, in a way, you can get something from the book by just reading a few pages. You don't have to read the whole book. And again, also, we live in times where people's attention spans are short, And so, in a way, that's that's what we were really working towards, and also having images, because I read a really beautiful book called An Arrow to the Heart. It's a beautiful book on the Heart Sutra, if you haven't read it. Absolutely stunning, and it's got these images and just these little pithy things. It's beautiful, and it's like a pocket. It's yeah. So I just wanted something with, and I think that was it, because I took, I was a bit of a heretic. I got my hands slapped because leading Mitra study, I said, oh, come on, let's just take a break from Mitra study and let's do something which isn't part of the curriculum. So we did, I think it's Ken MacLeod who wrote the book. And I had a couple of people in Mitra study on neurodivergent and ADHD, and they got so much from the images, and so much, and we would talk about the images as well as the text, and I just thought, I want something with images, so that it isn't just text based, and things with aphorisms and mnemonics, and
and visually it has that impact as well, doesn't it? And the content, and it seemed to me to be structured a bit around the foundations of mindfulness as well. So body, feelings, minds, and you talk at a certain point about thinking without a thinker, but also there's thinking without the stinker as well. So that comes in. But so is that the sort of the structure that you were working with, or?
I think, in a way, sometimes people ask me who the book is for, and I say the book is for people who want more freedom. The book is for people who perhaps just want more freedom from their mental and emotional states. And then those people who perhaps are Dharma practitioners, then that book is for those of you who've been doing a spiritual bypassing. Because we can be very good at that. So I two things. I think for me, I wanted something that didn't have to cost something. So in a way, everything, it doesn't, like the breath. The breath is medicine. I'm just really more and more, breath is medicine. And that's just something that we have with us 24/7, and actually just how we can begin to connect to the breath, and also just really realizing or recognizing that for some people, being in touch with the breath is the most scariest place to be. And so actually really teaching people to come home to the body, to come home to the breath.
So liberation from those limiting habits and the way we self-medicate or move away from our sort of direct experience. There's so much wisdom in there in terms of freeing ourselves. So thank you. So please do buy a copy. If you have bought a copy already, you can buy another one, give to a friend. But it'd be nice should we just open up and see if there are questions from the room as well. So we've got maybe 10-15 minutes. Anyone have a question?
So online, Elvis Memphis asks, where can I get the book, please?
Okay. It's difficult to know how to respond because I don't know if he's actually in Memphis. And
you can get it on Amazon.
There we are. Yes.
And if he doesn't want to, or if they don't want to buy it from Amazon, then go onto the Windhorse. So go onto my website, and there's a pop-up there, and they can buy it through Windhorse. Yeah.
Right. Yes, please.
One question. Say, what would you give? Say, just give some advice to your younger self. One bit of advice when you first started writing, and you first started experiencing the world through everything you've done. What would you say to your younger self?
What would I say to my younger self now?
Yeah. What would you say, given that you've got all the experience now? What would you say? Interested to know.
I was asked that the other day. It changes. What would I say to?
You can't think about it too long. It has to be spontaneous.
No pressure.
No pressure.
Oh, if I'm spontaneous, I say to my younger self, it was really great that you met people like Joan, Joan I met in my younger self, and then a bit younger, people like Nina. You know, I think like definitely there was something about my friends. I think I always say that actually our 20s is about recovering from our childhoods. Yeah. And I met some really wonderful people who we were all recovering from our childhoods together, you know. And I think that's really important. So, you know, if I go back to an even younger self, that actually, you know what, that you are loved. Yeah, you are loved. Yeah. And definitely in my 20s with the friends I was surrounded by, we were loved, you know. There wasn't the internet, you know, our family was out there in the club space. That was where our community was, and we were tight, and it was important. We grew together. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And there's Elaine here as well, actually, during those times. What was Elaine? Yeah, back there.
Right.
I have a question about the transcendental meditation.
Mm-hmm.
You said you did. I've never done it. I've always been interested in doing. But is there such a meditation in Buddhism? Or is it a Buddhist? It's not Buddhist. Well, I don't know how many. I mean, all the Buddhist different types of Buddhism. But I've never seen or read anything about the transcendental one in Buddhism. So I just wonder if there is just a simple question.
Well, what I would say is there's definitely meditations that can take you into the transcendental.
Yeah.
Yeah. So in Buddhism, most definitely. If you think, you can think of meditation in two categories, that there's samatha practices, and samatha practices are practices to calm the mind, to regulate the mind, you know, to regulate the heart. And then the category of vipassana, often people talk about vipassana, but vipassana practices are more insight practices and seeing things as they really are. And there are many practices that can take you into the transcendental and beyond.
Because the only contact I've been with the transcendental meditation was through a David Lynch book.
Okay.
That he wrote, like a little book that he wrote explaining how he got into the transcendental meditation, and that's it. That's all I heard about. But I was like,
Well, I would.
That sounds really interesting, like, but I've never done it, and I just wonder if there is in Buddhism. That like, I was just curious.
Well, I would say that actually this was my home for meditation and being on retreat, that I definitely at times went into the transcendental. Yeah. So, yeah. I mean, the thing is, it's an interesting question in the sense. I think how I want to respond to that is that many of us are wanting that big experience, wanting that transcendental experience, and I think what's so wonderful about the teachings of the Prince awakening, that actually before the Prince became awake and became a Buddha, the Prince didn't vow to find enlightenment. And I think that's so important. The Prince actually vowed to find an end of suffering, which is a complete different, you know, in a way. If it was to find enlightenment, that's where we do the spiritual bypassing. And that's what, you know, many of us want to be in that God realm. But actually it was the Prince vowed to find an end of suffering. And in terms of him waking up and becoming awake, becoming a Buddha, had to face the suffering, had to see through the suffering, to see things as they really are. So, yeah, and through that one reaches the transcendental and could be more lasting. Yeah.
Thank you.
Amy. Amber.
Yeah, so something that I've found really just like cool and like unusual about the book so far is that you speak quite directly about like slurs and things like that, and like encountering like discrimination and how to kind of face that from like a Buddhist perspective, which is something that like I don't come across very often in Buddhist texts. I was wondering how you think like having these tools and like the tools that you've gained with like Buddhism and all the work you've done over the years has shaped how you respond to like those kind of like discrimination things, I guess.
Yeah, I do actually write in the book very, very early on that I really do believe I'm very passionate about the mindfulness teaching, because I really do think they can save lives. And, you know, when I kind of, living in North America, let me dial back, living in North America, it really is quite intense of just waking up and seeing that another black or brown body has been killed by the police. And just knowing, and there was one incident where it was a young woman who actually, I think they thought she had stolen something, and you know, she was in the car and it was like, what, are you going to kill me or something? And they killed her. And I thought, that could have been me when I was young, just like that. What, you're going to kill me, whatever, you're going to, you know, that, you know, and I do talk about an incident that happened to me. And if I had known mindfulness then, I was like, actually I was most probably, I don't know, I was thinking, so 14 and 15, and I'm on an anti-Nazi march, and I'm the only black person there for miles holding this banner, and the police want this banner. And if I had known about mindfulness, I would have known that my system was completely activated. Yeah, that my system was completely activated, and I needed to take a pause. But actually, I was just, it's like that aggression, the racism, I was really, you know, not violent, but like kind of spoke back and whatever. And then you can read the book and see what happened to me. And so now that really, you know, for me, when I'm at airports, you know, I'm like, yeah, because, you know, where I live, it's almost like the people they're stopping when you're in the room that they're checking, it's like 3 black people, 3 brown people, and the white guy who's carrying the guitar. So, you know, it's so stereotypical. And, you know, I really lost it once, you know, and thinking, wow, you know, and so definitely the mindfulness has really allowed me to think, okay, I'm just activated right now. Let me just take a pause. So, for instance, when I'm in somewhere like Boston, where one of our retreat centre is, not so long ago, I was walking with one of my older member friends walking along the road, and a police car passes us, and the white order member carries on walking on, and I stop. Yeah. And I stop, and I have to really kind of just check myself before I can walk on, because just through the contact of that, you know, obviously they didn't want anything to do with me, but just seeing that contact and noticing, actually I'm activated right now. Yeah. So definitely the teachings have made me more aware of what's actually happening in my system, more aware of when my system feels the threat in the body. Yeah.
Thank you. So it might be time for 1 or 2 more questions. Yeah, please.
Actually, I have 2 questions.
Okay.
I hope they're one question was around what's your quickest way to alleviate anxiety, and the second question was more kind of like more around the you talked about the 10-day Vipassana, right? And so I just wondered, I don't know if you were aware today by then, it doesn't matter, but you kind of like just wondered how you perceive the Vipassana, the 10-day Vipassana training. I guess it's Gwenki, right? With the Buddhist path of Triratna.
Are you in the GFR process? Are you?
No,
you're not. Okay.
No, I'm not.
Sure. Just want to know the context of that question.
Yeah.
one of the quickest ways actually is I might stretch, actually. Yeah. Yeah. I might just stretch or just move the body or just place a hand. The quickest way. And actually in the book I have these mnemonics, and there's each letter represents something, and I actually say you can just use one of these letters, because of course when we're really activated we're not going to sit down and meditate, etc. So definitely that's one of the things I might do, is just stretch or just get up or take a deep breath. Yeah, definitely take a deep breath. In terms of your other question, back in the day, Triratna didn't really do silent retreats that well, and so I really wanted something really quite intense. I think now that silent retreats are very different, and you can get really good silent retreats then, but back in the day. And I think also I was one of these people, it's all or nothing, intensity, and so definitely, like Goenka, he's a Dharma practitioner. I mean, what Goenka says, that anybody can have these teachings, whether you're whether you're a Muslim or you're Jewish or Palestinian or whatever, you can have these teachings. But as a Dharma practitioner, I mean, the whole teaching is a Noble Eightfold Path. So it's definitely they don't conflict at all. Yeah. And we had one last question was it from there? You had your hand up.
Oh, sorry, yeah, I just had a question.
Okay.
My question was, so you mentioned this anti-Nazi march you were at, and this being active.
Mm-hmm.
So, like, something I'm quite curious about, the sort of anger is considered like quite an unskillful state, right, of mind, from what I know of the Dharma. What relation do you think there's any place for anger in like social justice? Because I see a lot of that in those spaces, and I wonder if a lot of that is fueled by anger. And from a Buddhist perspective, how do you replace that with something else?
Yeah, I think it depends who you're speaking to. I think what can be unskillful is how anger may be expressed. I really don't think that anger's energy. It's an energy that is arising in the body, and I talk about that in the book, the Vitakapasana Sutta. Okay. Where the Buddha clearly says, when you're working with distracting thoughts, if all else fails, just crush it. Just really that real energy. And so I really think, like with social justice, I think like when during the George Floyd moment, and it was England, was it Bristol, where the first statue toppled. I thought that was really skillful anger. People had been in rooms politely saying, these statues are offensive and they're not coming down, and the statues come down and then they start coming down all over the world, and I think that was really a skillful use of anger. It didn't hurt anybody, it didn't, so I think there is a real place for social justice in a couple of my other books, African Wisdom, New Voices Talk, Buddha, I've got so many books I can't remember. African Wisdom, and also I'm Still Your Negro, homage to James Baldwin, really is a social justice text, and I do bring some Dharma aspects to it. So I think what we have to really look at is really the unskillful state for me with anger is if it tips into real hatred and real ill will, because it's so harmful to us, let alone anybody else. With anger, for some people, anger can actually get people moving. Anger can actually make people do some really skillful things. So I think, you know, for me, it's the way it's expressed, it's the way it's communicated, and it's energy, yeah. And I do think that I mean, it's interesting that we talk about, you know, engaged Buddhism, social justice, because actually, in a way, the Buddha was quite political and did engage Buddhism, and then, you know, we think of people like Mbeka as well. So I think there definitely is a place for social justice in the Dharmic world, and there has to be a place, because that's what the new generation is bringing into the Dharma halls, and if it isn't accepted, then I think something will happen in terms of Buddhism in the West. Yeah. Okay.
Thanks so much, Vimalasara. Let's finish there. Thank you. Thanks so much for joining us. So much to sort of think about and inspire us. And yeah, so please do buy the book. Highly recommended. Yeah, thanks so much for coming along to this evening. Thanks online as well for joining us.
And thank you for great interview, great conversation,
My pleasure. Yeah, my job is to sort of try and get out of the way and encourage you, yeah, really appreciated that. So thank you. So yeah, if we could put our mats and cushions away. Thank you if you've donated to the class, and you're very welcome to be here if you are unable to donate. Do feel free to donate on the way out as well if you so wish. Yeah, the whole sort of Buddhist Centre runs on dana, on generosity. So thank you, and see you again soon. Thank you. Thank you. Yeah. Okay, it's good for you. I enjoyed it.
Yeah, no, it was good. It was great actually. I spoke about stuff that I haven't spoken about. So, yeah.
And thanks for the book. Yeah, it's just strong book.
Yeah. Good to be in this context.
Great. Yeah.
And it's just great to just see the change.
Oh yes, yeah.
It's exciting. That's right. And I know you've been part of it, so yeah.
No, I really like this format, just conversation, a bit more relaxed. So it's really nice. Thank you.
Congratulations. Thank you. See you tomorrow.
Yes, I maybe you can actually see because my partner's over now. So in that, I'll be in touch with you in that log, and then we can actually see people.
Yeah, what if you want to have a bridge?
You mentioned the fish bars in Brixton, right?
Yeah.
I want used to go there back in the day. Yeah.
What's your name?
Angela, we probably have
Angela.
Angela.